All right, so this video is a follow-up and hopefully a bit more concise summarization and walkthrough the video that I just posted titled What is Spirituality? Explaining definitions and explaining explanations. It was about a 36-minute video, but in this one I want to be just more direct and concise and just walk through some like practical applications working with both sides of the definitions, and also being clear from the beginning that I'm not saying anything is good or bad, better or worse, right or wrong, or anyone should or shouldn't do anything. Not at all whatsoever. We all each have our own rights and individuality to do as we wish and do things that work for us. Again, so what works for me is in providing definitions and conversation and hopefully deepening awareness through the process. So if we understand spirit using that term as being this high vibrational thing which sits behind or above or somehow outside of our physical experience. This is something that people would historically, generally, and traditionally throughout time worked extremely difficult and dedicated their whole lives to basically preparing and getting to the process of being able to contact and access this high vibrational thing. So they did practices and things to condition their body, to set up the right things to condition their energy to do the right conditions, and then things to condition their mind or their consciousness, let's say, and basically spent probably their entire life struggling and suffering and sacrificing and dedicating themselves to this objective to hope to contact this thing and work with this highly vibrational thing, thus having to go through all of the preparatory stages. So if we understand that being more of a traditional, workable, functional, practical definition, we'll look at that, and then now let's look at kind of what people generally think spirituality is and how it generally shows up, and compare and contrast these two things. And if we just look online, generally the consensus, if you just start to Google around what is spirituality, the general consensus is like whatever you want it to be. It's totally subjective and up to you and whatever feels right for you in your own personal reality, which I totally agree with. We all, like as I said, have that right. But that's not really the view of ancient traditions. That's an inherently modern construct that has really only come about in very recent times, and is also, I think, an extension of basically what political theorists and analysts and basically puppet masters realized very early on, I think in the 90s, around the time of Bill Clinton and Tony Blair, is that people feel much better being controlled or manipulated or cajoled or manipulated or influenced if they feel like it's out of their own individuality or it's like their own version of that. And this is pretty easily to observe historical phenomenon, which I'm not going to get into now, but simple 20 minutes of research can show you the roots and the actual people behind these ideas and how it was implemented and how it showed up. But in my opinion, the common understanding that spirituality is like whatever you want is the same mindset that's running the political engine and the marketing type of economic engine, that's totally fine. That's the world we live in, but we have to understand it's not really where these older traditions were coming from. Okay, so let's look at some like definitions, because people will start to say, oh, well, you know, I took a yoga class and yoga is spiritual, and I feel more connected to my spiritual self because I do yoga. And it's like, well, first, how was yoga spiritual? What are the actual mechanics that it's working upon? What aspects of your spirit are you working on? And let's just look at this. What we are saying by like, oh, I went to a yoga class or did this workshop, or I attended a temple or mass or church, and I'm more in touch with my spiritual self. What we're saying is, sure, I basically through doing these things, I was able to bypass all of the other work in conditioning and effort and suffering and sacrifice that tons of people did throughout many different traditions to arrive at a place of contacting this high vibration thing. I bypassed all of that because I got in my Prius or whatever, or I took public transit to the yoga studio or the temple or the church or whatever, hung out there for an hour, 15 minutes, 2 hours, and now I'm like checking Facebook and Instagram, and now I feel like way more spiritual. Yeah, so we bypassed all of that prior work of conditioning our body, our energetic system, and our consciousness to hopefully then maybe have a chance to contact something. Yes, we bypassed all of that through our yoga class and this other experience that I'm listing. That's what we're saying. Okay, I mean, I'm just trying to be like clear on kind of like what we're meaning. If we actually go into it deeper, or we could say, oh, well, I do psychotherapy, or I'm into like working through my stuff, so now I'm more spiritual. Or I took ayahuasca and I just processed a bunch of stuff and healed and released and this and that, and now I'm more spiritual. Or, you know, I'm really working on being a nice person, or I cleaned up my diet, or I'm getting into painting and being creative, or I went to a oneness festival or a transformation festival, an ecstatic dance, whatever. We can see all these examples and how this commonly shows up. But again, if we actually look at the mechanics of the actual experience, it's generally a combination of three things. This aspect of some mental projection, meaning a connection of our self-image to these things, and then how these things are positively affecting our self-image. That's one thing that we're getting. The other is sensations on our nervous system. So it's meditation or a yoga class, we're getting relaxed, we're feeling good, we're feeling healthier because our blood's moving better, more flexible, more open, more relaxed, which are amazing things to feel. And then we get some type of emotional response in our heart. So maybe we feel a sense of community, feel a sense of connection with people, we feel a sense of relationship. So we have those things that we are then saying, oh, well, that's a spiritual experience. But actually what we're saying is some rearrangement or perceived improvement of our self-image, something that we feel on our nervous system, and an emotional reward. That's what we are saying, and what we are saying, those things are our spirit, which, if we understand that a spirit is a high vibrational thing that is sitting beyond or behind this physical dimension, there's a lot of filling in the blanks that have to happen to pull these things over here. And we're also implying that somehow we've bypassed all of the work and requirement that has typically always been necessary, unless we happen to be an extremely gifted, genius level individual, which, you know, definitely does happen. But these are just what is being said and implied. But then when we listen to what people are saying, what they're referring to is the things that I just listed. So it becomes a bit confusing, as we can see, and things aren't really lining up. And it's also, generally these things are occurring within a vague and directionless context. Vague in the sense that we're not clearly understanding our experience for what it is. We're not able to perceive and label things accurately and correctly, and we're not doing it within a larger context of a tried and true path of evolution. Because the thing is, for example, you meet people who have been saying, oh, I've been doing yoga and meditation for 40 years. It's like, really? I've been doing Qigong for 30 years. Really? Like, you should have moved on. You probably should have understood that each one of those things was trying to develop certain skills, certain qualities according to certain principles, according to certain cosmology and philosophical system, that it was actually a systematic process of progression to cultivate these things, not something you just do and then it like somehow magically transform you. Meaning, this is what I'm trying to get at, is what is the actual substance or the juice or the mechanics behind these things? Generally, no one understands them, so we have to rely on and fill in the blanks with hedonism, escapism, morality, ethics, salvation, psychotherapy, collectivism, health, and vanity, or some aspect of creativity. And this is what we are labeling and construing as, oh, this is higher, this is elevated, this is better. So it just really gets rather a bit confusing, is all. So again, point of the video, I'm not saying anything is good or bad, right or wrong, or anyone should or shouldn't do or do anything. No, not my interest, not my place, don't have that right. We each have the right to make those decisions for ourselves and figure out these things that work for ourselves based on what feels right for us, because we're all adults, hopefully. But anyways, just wanted to ask these questions and try to have a bit more, I don't know, clarity. Seems useful. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.